When a black belt challenged a quiet new girl to a fun spar, everyone laughed, until the match began. What happened next left the entire gym frozen in disbelief. This isn't just a fight, it's a lesson in never underestimating someone. Watch closely, because you won't believe how it ends. Bet you can't last 30 seconds with me. The voice was loud enough to cut through the rhythmic thumps of gloves hitting heavy bags, the squeak of feet sliding across mats, and the chatter of students warming up. Heads turned toward the sparring area like someone had just announced a free fight night. At the center stood Derek, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose black belt wasn't just for show. He had been training at the gym for years, winning tournaments, teaching beginners, and, if you asked around, showing off a bit too often. His signature move? Picking on newcomers in a way that was just barely friendly enough to pass as a joke. Today, his attention had landed on Nia. She had joined the gym only 2 weeks ago. Every time she walked in, she wore a simple t-shirt and leggings, hair tied neatly back, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't feel the need to prove anything. She went through warm-ups without fanfare, never sparred in front of anyone, and left as soon as class ended. To Derek, she was the perfect target for a little harmless fun. Leaning against the ropes, he smirked at his friends, who were already grinning in anticipation. He stepped forward and called out his challenge, voice dripping with playful arrogance. The reaction was immediate. Students chuckled, a few exchanged amused glances, and someone whispered, "She's not gonna do it." Nia, standing near the edge of the mats, paused. She slowly turned her head toward him. Her eyes met his, steady, calm, and unreadable. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just tilted her head slightly, as if sizing him up. "Sure. Let's spar." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a pin dropping in a church. For a moment, the entire gym seemed to inhale at once. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the background music faded into irrelevance. Derek blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't expected her to accept. This was supposed to be a teasing comment, a crowd pleaser, a way to make his buddies laugh. Instead, it felt like he had just signed himself up for something real. All right then," he said, grinning again, but his voice carried a slight edge now. He looked around the room, trying to play it cool. "Guess we're doing this." The other students quickly caught on to the unfolding drama. Within seconds, people were moving benches, clearing space, and making a wide circle around the mats. Phones appeared in hands. Someone whispered, "This is gonna be over in 10 seconds, and a few chuckles followed. But not everyone was so sure. Coach Mason, the gym's owner, a grizzled veteran with years of competition under his belt, stood with his arms crossed, studying Nia. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, as though he was noticing something no one else had. "All right," Coach said, stepping in between them. "Light sparring. Keep it clean. No hard shots." Nia nodded once. Derek rolled his shoulders, tapping his gloves together in a show of confidence. "You ready for this?" he asked, trying to regain control of the moment. She simply adjusted her stance, hands loose but ready. There was something strange about her posture, not tense, not rigid, but balanced in a way that suggested comfort in this environment. Her weight shifted ever so slightly, her feet perfectly spaced. It wasn't the stance of a complete beginner. A few people in the crowd noticed and exchanged puzzled glances. The whistle wasn't even in Coach Mason's mouth yet, but the air was already electric. Every eye was locked on the pair in the middle. Derek was grinning, but Nia's face was unreadable. And though she hadn't thrown a single punch, there was an unshakable feeling in the room. Something told the crowd that this friendly spar might not go the way everyone expected. The shuffle of feet against the mats grew louder as the gym rearranged itself. Heavy bags swayed quietly in the background, abandoned mid-session. A circle was forming, half curious, half hungry for entertainment. Derek stood in the center, bouncing lightly on his heels. His friends leaned against the ropes, grinning as if they'd already written the ending in their heads. "Man, she's in for it," one of them muttered. On the far side, Nia stepped forward. No rush, no fidgeting. She simply slid her gloves on, one strap at a time, her eyes never leaving Derek. She didn't need to stare him down, her calm was enough to make a few people uneasy. Coach Mason paced between them, the whistle hanging loosely from his neck. "All right, people," he said, glancing at the onlookers, "light sparring rules. This is just a friendly, keep it clean, keep it controlled." Friendly or not, the atmosphere was anything but casual. Phones were already out. A couple of teenagers perched on the edge of the ring to get a better view. The faint smell of sweat and disinfectant hung in the air, but the real scent was tension. "Ready?" Coach asked. Derek smirked, tapping his gloves together. "Born ready." Nia just nodded. No words. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Does she even know how to spar?" Another voice answered, "She's about to find out the hard way." But on the far side, Coach Mason's eyes lingered on Nia. He had seen thousands of fighters, beginners, champions, and everything in between, and something about her stance caught his attention. She wasn't stiff like most first-timers. Her feet were placed just right, weight balanced, shoulders relaxed. It was a stance that didn't come from watching YouTube tutorials. It came from years of doing this. The whistle blew. Derek came forward first, light on his feet, his gloves up high. He didn't throw a punch right away, he was testing her reactions. Nia mirrored his movement, her eyes locked on his chest, reading every twitch, every shift. The crowd was quiet now, the earlier laughs replaced with sharp focus. They wanted to see how she'd handle the first move. Derek darted in with a quick jab. Nia slid to the side, just enough to let it sail past her cheek. She didn't counter. She didn't even flinch. "All right," Derek said under his breath, "you've got reflexes." He tried again, this time a quick 1-2 combo. Nia leaned back, pivoted, and was already at an angle before his second punch was halfway extended. The spectators began murmuring. "Okay, she's not bad," one said. Derek's smile tightened. He wasn't in trouble yet, but this wasn't going the way he had imagined. He'd expected her to throw wild punches he could easily dodge, giving him the chance to show off. Instead, she wasn't rushing. She was waiting. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, not from exhaustion, but from something else. Something he didn't want to name. On the sidelines, Coach Mason folded his arms. "He has no idea," he muttered to himself. The crowd leaned in closer, their eyes darting between Derek's aggressive footwork and Nia's almost surgical calm. Every step she took was deliberate. Every movement looked like she'd already thought 2 moves ahead. And though no one realized it yet, the moment of the first real shock was only seconds away. Derek decided it was time to stop testing and start proving a point. With a sudden burst forward, he snapped a jab toward Nia's face, not hard, but quick enough to make most beginners flinch. Nia didn't flinch. She dipped her head just enough for the punch to pass over her shoulder, and in the same fluid motion, she shifted her weight and tapped him lightly on the ribs with a quick right hand. It wasn't a hard shot, barely more than a touch, but it was clean, precise, and impossible to ignore. A ripple of sound ran through the crowd. It wasn't quite cheering yet, just a collective wait. "What?" Derek paused for half a second, his grin flickering before snapping back into place. All right," he said, giving a short laugh. "Got lucky." But deep down, something had changed. He'd been expecting clumsy punches, poor balance, and easy openings. Instead, she'd landed first. That wasn't luck, it was timing. Determined to reassert control, Derek circled her, throwing a series of light jabs, testing for weaknesses. Nia's eyes never left his chest, tracking his movements. Each time he advanced, she gave just enough ground to avoid the strike, her feet gliding across the mat without crossing. "Come on, throw something," he teased, but it came out more as a request than a taunt. She did. This time, Nia stepped in, not recklessly, but with calculated precision. A feint with her left hand drew Derek's guard up, and before he realized it, she'd pivoted and tapped his thigh with a perfectly placed kick. It was so quick that some people in the crowd didn't even see it land, they only heard the light thwack against his leg. "Yo, she's fast," someone whispered from the sidelines. A new energy rippled through the room. Phones were now recording steadily. What had started as a casual, almost comedic challenge was beginning to feel like an exhibition match. Derek, feeling the shift in the crowd, decided to turn up the pace. He darted forward with a sharper combination, jab, cross, hook, his punches snapping through the air. But each time, Nia was already moving, sliding just outside his range, her gloves poised but relaxed. On the third attempt, Derek tried to catch her off guard with a low kick. He'd used it dozens of times on less experienced partners, it usually forced them off balance. But Nia seemed to read it the moment his hip turned. She lifted her leg to check the kick, then returned with a counter jab that tapped his shoulder. The crowd reacted immediately, cheers, gasps, and a few stunned laughs. Derek stepped back, his expression shifting from confident to calculating. She wasn't overpowering him. She wasn't even hitting him hard. But she was landing, consistently. In fighting, there's a special kind of pressure, not from pain, but from the realization that your opponent is in control. Derek could feel that pressure now. The onlookers were hooked. Every feint, every sidestep, every light tap from Nia drew bigger reactions. People who'd been expecting a quick, one-sided display of Derek's skill were now glued to the possibility that they were watching something very different unfold. Derek adjusted his gloves, smirked again, but this time it was forced. "All right," he muttered, "no more playing around." But what he didn't know, and what the crowd was just starting to suspect, was that for Nia, this was still playing around. Derek rolled his shoulders, bouncing lightly on his feet. The playful energy he'd started with was gone. This was no longer about a laugh in front of his friends, this was about pride. The crowd could feel the change. Conversations had stopped. The only sounds were the squeak of bare feet against the mat and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Derek came forward with purpose now, his strike sharper, his combinations faster. He launched a crisp jab cross, followed by a quick low kick aimed at Nia's lead leg. This time, he wasn't holding back as much. But Nia was still there, calm, unshaken. She checked the kick, pivoted out of range, and with a subtle shift of her weight, made Derek's follow-up hook slice through empty air. The crowd reacted instantly. "Yo!" someone shouted. Another voice, "She's reading him like a book." Derek's jaw tightened. He surged forward again, this time trying to trap her against the mat's edge. Nia backpedaled smoothly, then at the last second, sidestepped and pivoted, leaving him punching at nothing but air. In the same breath, she placed a quick tap on his side with her glove, a scoring shot if this had been a tournament. The circle of onlookers erupted in cheers. Some clapped, others whistled. Derek's friends, who'd been grinning earlier, now stood with folded arms, their smiles gone. "You okay, man?" one of them called out, half joking. "I'm fine," Derek said, but his breathing was heavier now. The match had been going for less than 2 minutes, yet he felt like he was working harder than in most of his training sessions. Nia, on the other hand, wasn't even breathing hard. She kept her gloves up, her eyes laser-focused, as if she were still warming up. Derek decided to go big. He stepped back, gave himself space, and spun into a high roundhouse kick, a move that always got a reaction. His leg came around fast, but Nia ducked under it so effortlessly it looked like she'd seen it coming a mile away. And then, she struck. In one fluid motion, she swept her leg low, hooking behind his knee and pulling just enough to take away his balance. Derek stumbled forward, catching himself before hitting the mat, but the damage was done. The gym exploded. Cheers, laughter, shouts, everybody was on their feet. Phones tilted higher to catch every second. Derek straightened, shaking his head with a sheepish smile, trying to play it off. But his eyes told the truth, he knew she could have finished that move and put him on the ground if she'd wanted to. Coach Mason's voice cut through the noise. "Control. Good control, Nia." There was respect in his tone, the kind reserved for fighters who not only had skill but discipline. Nia simply nodded, stepping back into her stance. She hadn't mocked him. She hadn't celebrated. She was here to spar, not embarrass. For Derek, that almost made it worse. She wasn't trying to win points in the crowd's eyes, she was just better. The rest of the room saw it too. This wasn't luck, and it wasn't a fluke. Derek, the gym's most confident black belt, was being outmaneuvered by someone they'd all underestimated. And in that moment, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The whistle blew, signaling the end of the round. For a moment, neither Derek nor Nia moved. Derek's gloves hung just a little lower than before, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Nia, in contrast, looked almost untouched, her breathing calm, her posture still steady, like she could easily go another 3 rounds. The gym was buzzing. Conversations overlapped, phones stopped recording only so people could start showing the footage to the person next to them. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something they'd be talking about for weeks. Derek pulled off his gloves, a faint smile on his face, not the cocky grin he'd started with, but one of genuine humility. He stepped toward Nia and extended his hand. "You got me," he said, his voice low but clear. "I underestimated you. Won't happen again." Nia unclipped her gloves and shook his hand, her grip firm but friendly. She gave a small smile. "Sometimes, people think they know what someone can do just by looking at them," she said. "But skill doesn't always announce itself." There was no arrogance in her tone, no gloating, just truth. And somehow, that made the moment hit even harder. Coach Mason stepped forward, his voice carrying over the chatter. "All right, everyone. Let me introduce you properly. This is Nia, 6 years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 4 years of Muay Thai, and she's been boxing since she was a teenager. Her father's a coach." A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Derek's friends exchanged looks, a mix of surprise and respect. Someone near the back muttered, "Well, that explains a lot." But the truth was, even without knowing her background, everyone had already seen the proof. Derek let out a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I should have done my homework before running my mouth." "You weren't the first," Nia replied, her smile widening slightly, "and you probably won't be the last." The crowd chuckled, the tension in the room melting into a warm hum of admiration. A few students came over to congratulate her, others asked if she taught private sessions. From that day on, Nia wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was the fighter who had stood toe-to-toe with one of the gym's top black belts and handled him with ease. People began watching her warm-ups with interest, paying attention to her footwork, her timing, her precision. As for Derek, the loss didn't damage his reputation, it reshaped it. He still trained hard, still sparred with everyone, but now there was a note of caution in the way he approached newcomers. And whenever someone in the gym tried to joke about challenging Nia, Derek would shake his head and say, "Trust me, don't." Over the weeks, the story spread beyond the gym walls. Visitors would come in and ask, "Hey, is this where that girl beat the black belt?" Videos from that day floated around online, titled things like "New Girl School's Black Belt" and "The Fight No One Saw Coming." Nia never corrected anyone. She didn't need to. She hadn't come to the gym to prove anything to the crowd, she came to train, to keep her skills sharp, and maybe, just maybe, to remind a few people that appearances can be deceiving. And though the mats were cleaned and the crowd eventually went home, one thing stayed, the quiet, unshakable respect she had earned in less than a single round. And just like that, the loudest guy in the room was silenced by the quietest fighter in the gym. If you enjoyed watching this epic moment, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life stories. Your next favorite video is just one click away.